Perfect.
Hello,
How are
Paul.
you, Jacques?
I'm very good, thank you.
Great to see you.
It's great.
Perfect timing, 7 o'clock. Have you had lunch?
Not yet. I will have
Not
it
yet.
right after.
Okay, so we'll have a liquid lunch or a liquid
Absolutely.
dinner. Okay. Well, we'll wait for a few more people to log on, and then we can start
Okay,
right away. So you
excellent.
have these bottles with you as well?
Right there on my desk.
Okay, fabulous. Have you been drinking some of your 17s already, or this is the few times that you've touched it?
In fact, um, with the COVID-19 issues, we did not receive clients for since 2 months now,
Right,
and I
right,
had
right.
finally not that many occasions to open some bottles. So I'm glad to have a drink to the 17th now. I didn't open them since 2 months, so it will be interesting
Okay,
to see.
okay, good, good, good. All right, let's start. Now, I think we should start with some background of the domain, also the clo, the history, and all that, and then we can move on.
Okay, excellent. So, in fact, the history of the domain, it's the history of the Clos des Lambrays itself, and it's a very complex history. I can talk about it during half a day, so I will try to make it short. And it's an interesting history because finally it starts very classically, and after there is some original developments and issues. So what is very classical, it is this vineyard used to be the property of the Citeaux Abbey in 1365. And you know, we have the writing trace of it. I have here at the domain this document, which is dated from 1365, and it's written
1365.
there, Clos des Lambrays, and it's a
Okay.
renting contract in between the Citeaux Abbey and the previous owner of the Clos des Lambrays. So this vineyard was planted before 1365, and we have this writing trace. After as many vineyards in Burgundy, with French Revolution, a couple of centuries later, in 1791, this property, that has been, during all those centuries, the property of the Citeaux Abbey, has been sold. And from this date, 1791, the clos started to be divided and divided and divided again. And this is a general evolution of the vineyard in Burgundy. And this is why today, as a result, you have a vineyard which is divided in between plenty of little plots owned by many different owners. This is a general evolution of the property in Burgundy. But for the Clos des Lambrays, what is original? It is in the middle of the 19th century, one man called Mr. Joly then had a couple of plots inside the Clos des Lambrays, had a dream, had a vision. He tried to recreate the unity of the Clos des Lambrays as it used to be before French Revolution, when it was the property of the Citeaux Abbey. And he spent his entire life to try to buy, plot by plot, the neighbors around him. And at the domain, we have the map of that, you see. This is a map of the Clos des Lambrays, and what is in dark green, it's the property of Mr. Joly, and we can see the other little plots than he was trying to buy. So
How
Mr.
many
Joly,
owners were there? The maximum number of owners during
it's
that time?
written right there. It's at the bottom of the list. This is the list of all the different owners.
Oh, wow.
52. And you know, we have all the details about where located the little plots and so and so. So
Huh.
in the middle of the 19th century, you had 52 different owners of Clos des Lambrays. But nothing
52.
really special. You know, this is typical of the evolution of the property in Burgundy. So Mr. Joly bought a couple of them, but it did not succeed. And after, the Clos des Lambrays has been bought by another family called the Rodier family, which is quite famous in Burgundy for other reasons. But the Rodier family succeed. They recreate the unity of the Clos des Lambrays. And beginning of the 20th century, the Clos des Lambrays was back as a single piece. It was a monopoly back again.
So it was what, before the First World War?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And how did they manage to do it? Because they have more money, or they were more powerful? I mean, how did they convince so many owners?
It's not all about money, you know. It's to be well introduced and to have the good and the right connections. In fact, the Rodier family was very famous. They, as an example, they were part of the creation of the Confrérie des Chevaliers du Tastevin, which is a great organization. And Mr. Rodier wrote a reference book as well about the classification of the vineyard in Burgundy. So it was one of the highly regarded family in Burgundy. And with all this influence, they could both all the different small owners of the Clos des Lambrays. So
how long did it take them?
It took them 40 years.
40 years. Okay.
Yes, 40 years. So it's a great story, because this vineyard used to be a single piece during a couple of centuries until French Revolution. After it has been divided, and beginning of the 20th century, it was back as a monopoly. And it is not the end of the story, because this lasts until 1974. And in 1974, one producer of Moret Saint-Denis realized the end of his garden was, for some reason, classified as Clos des Lambrays. So he put away the lettuce and the tomatoes, and he plants vines. And now we are two producers of Clos des Lambrays. Alors, this domain is the domain Taupe-Nomerme. It's a great domain, and you know, it's part of the history of Burgundy. You know, it's part of the little stories. But since 1974, you have two producers of Clos des Lambrays, the Domaine des Lambrays and the Domaine Taupe-Nomerme. And what we can say about it, it is in Burgundy, we talk in ouvre. Ouvre as surface measurement. We do own 202 ouvres. 202 ouvres. And the other domain, the domaine Taupe-Nomerme, they own one ouvre. So we own more than 99.5% of the surface of the Clos des Lambrays. Okay. Voilà, so this is, you know, basically our history, which is very rich, from the high Middle Age until now.
So, question regarding the part that Taupe-Nomerme owns. How was it ever part of the? I mean, it's part of Clos, but was it ever planted with vines?
I think it was planted with vines, because on the map I showed you before, we see this plot. So this is why
it was there.
It has been classified, and at one point, for some reasons, the vines disappear.
Okay.
And they have been planted back after.
Okay. So we know, you know, some of us know the domain has several other wines. Can you tell us about the Premier Cru and the Village? Are they from the Clos? Are they not from the Clos? And also, of course, the addition of the white wines that the estate also makes. Okay,
maybe I can start saying then the Clos des Lambrays, the Domaine des Lambrays today is 11.6 hectares. So we own 11 hectares in the village of Moret Saint-Denis and 0.6 hectares in the village of Puligny-Montrachet. So these 0.6 hectares in Puligny have been bought in 1993. And we are blessed because it's two beautiful vineyards, two little plots. We have 0.3 hectares of Puligny Premier Cru Les Folatières, located right on the hillside, on the hilly part of Les Folatières. And as well, we have 0.36 hectares of Clos du Cailleret. Clos du Cailleret, which is definitely one of the great premiers crus of Puligny because it's touching Le Montrachet and it's a great location. So after, what is left is 11 hectares in the village of Moret-Saint-Denis. So, of course, the main piece is the Clos des Lambrays with 8.66 hectares. After, what is left is 0.7 hectares of Moret-Saint-Denis Premier Cru. To be precise, we have 3 little plots of Moret Premier Cru. We have La Riotte, we have Les Sorbets, and we have Le Village. But these 3 plots are always vinified all together into the same tank. And we make our Moret Saint-Denis Premier Cru Les Loups. This is the name of the cuvée, Les Loups. And to finish with, we have some Moret Saint-Denis Village. We have 1.6 hectares of Moret Saint-Denis Village. And what is original about these wines, it is that most of the time the village wines, they come from down the slope. Us, our villages, plots are located up the slope. We have one plot just on the top of the Clos des Lambrays, which is Les Larrets, and we have a second plot on the top of the Clos de Tare, which is En la Rue de Vergy. And we blend these 2 plots to make our Moret Saint-Denis Village.
And do some of the young vines from the Clos go into these 2 wines?
It used to be, not anymore. It used to be because back in 1980, 2.5 hectares of the Clos des Lambrays has been replanted. So during years and years, it used to be young vines. And typically, they used to be declassified down in the Moret Saint-Denis Premier Cru, Les Loups. But now they turn 40 years old, so there is no reason anymore to declassify them down.
Okay. Since what vintage was that?
Until
changed?
Recently, I think the last vintage for the declassification of Les Loups was 2016.
2016. Okay, so very
recently. Yes,
yeah.
recently.
Okay, good. You want us to show some of the pictures or some the map you sent, or maybe as if for later?
Yeah, but I send it to you. I don't have them right now on my desk.
Let me see. Moret Saint-Denis.
Voilà. This is nice. Like that, you have the different plots of the domain, and you can see the Clos des Lambrays in red, ideally located right in the middle, in the center of the village, with Clos de Tare south and Clos Saint-Denis on the north. And after, you see the 2 plots of village I was talking to you about before. They are in purple. They are up the slope. One plot on the top of the Clos des Lambrays and one plot on the top of the Clos de Tare. And the 3 little plots of Moret Premier Cru, they are in the middle, you see. You have La Riotte, Les Sorbets, and le village just below the Clos des Lambrays.
Okay, good. All right. I understand some of our viewers must be thirsty. Let's move to the first red. Moret Saint-Denis 17. So tell us a little bit about. You told us something about the wine already. The vineyards already. So the 2 plots. 17. What was that like?
17 was this kind of vintage with a very early start in the beginning of the season, because spring was like summer. So the vines grew very, very fast. And the flowering, which is like a reference point of the growing season, the flowering was very early. It was beginning of June. Most of the time it's mid-June. It was June 4th. And after we had the very nice months of August, and it ended up to be harvested the first days of September. in September 4th. So it's typically this kind of very early picking vintage. And I think this style of vintage early in the vineyard make in the wine an early opening of the wine in the bottle. It makes wines very accessible, very on the fruit, intense. It's all the opposite of a vintage like 13, for example, which is a late growing season, harvested in October, and it's this kind of vintage and take longer to open. But those vintages like 17, you have other examples like 07, 11, all those vintages have been harvested early. It makes wines and have early opening into the bottle, and you can enjoy them early. That do not mean they will not last, of course.
How are we talking about a similar schedule for 19? I mean 20, this vintage.
20 is minimum 10 days in advance compared to 17.
Wow.
This is crazy. You know, I was talking to the old vigneron of Moret, and they never seen such a fast beginning of growing season. We had the flowering in May the 22nd, which is just incredible. It's 3 weeks in advance compared to a normal year. And I prepare myself to harvest probably around August the 25th, the reds.
And the whites will be what, even earlier?
We'll see, because I was just in Puligny this morning, and I have a good news to share. The flowering has been great, and we have nice crop than we can expect. So we'll see. We'll see that. It's according to the yield as well. Sometimes, I mean, it used to be the white before the reds. Traditionally, Côte de Beaune was harvesting the Chardonnay before the Pinot. On the last vintages, it's not true every year. So we will see. We will see that. But definitely, it will be. It will be end of August.
Okay. You wanna open this bottle?
Yes. So this is
Do you use
Moret
Coravin, or you have it open already?
You know, I prefer to open the bottle myself. It's much better.
Our friends from Coravin is logged on as well. They're checking whether we're using the Coravin machine.
Okay. But you have to be carefully, you know. Me, I'm at the domain. I can open the bottle, and after I can share the bottle, and it's
Right,
it's
of
nice.
course. How's everybody at the domain? Are they all working?
Yes, we are all working.
All back to work.
It's the 3 months critical. May, June, July. Everything happened during those 3 weeks. Those 3 months, sorry. So at the beginning of the season, we have been very concerned with lockdown and the precautions we had to take. But finally, it's working very well. I mean, working in a vineyard is probably the safest place to work.
Yeah.
And yes, everybody is working, and it's going pretty well.
Wonderful. Good. So how would you describe this wine? How much time would you allow it to open? I mean, it's quite forward, but then I feel the difference already, having breathed the wine for about 10, 15, 20 minutes.
My experience about that, it is if you open the bottle 3-4 hours in advance, it's perfect.
The village.
The village. And the premier cru and the grand cru. The wines have the possibility to breathe, to open up, And this is what I did actually. Huh? I opened those bottles at about 9 a.m. for me. And I can see the difference. Believe me, at 9 it was very straightforward on the fruit, and now there is more complexity showing up. So myself, I would recommend to open them 4 hours in advance. No decanting, nothing. Just open the wine and open the bottle and let it breathe.
Okay. But do you then pour a glass out? Because if you just open the bottle, the opening will be that much only.
Yes, and this is what is good, what is fair, what is enough. It's plenty enough. Or if you take a little sap and you have a little bit low level, it's fine. Like 2 centimeters down compared to the opening level, it's fine.
Okay. That's what I like to do too, because we're drinking wines quite early. I mean, in terms of the evolution, we're drinking them at an earlier stage. So we're trying the 17s and anything that are recently shipped from the domain will be young. So we're quite used to trying them, but we like to open them as well very early and pour a glass out and let it breathe for a few hours. They call it slow ox, right? Slow ox seems to be the way to go. But what do you think about decanting?
I don't like it. It's a personal feeling, but I don't like it. I think it's too brutal. I think Pinot Noir is a great variety, delicate, and this slow oxidation is much better for our wines. I believe this is my experience about that. I hate decanting Burgundy wine, especially the old wines. Let's say if you have a very young wine, recently bottled, and you open it and there is a touch of reduction and you have to drink it on the coming half an hour, yes, why not decanting? But otherwise, I prefer much more this slow oxidation process with opening the bottle 4 hours in advance.
Okay. What about the drinking window for a wine like this? When would you start drinking it? I mean, really opening bottles and sharing with friends and showing it at dinner settings.
We have part of the answer in the glass. You put the nose on the glass, the flavors comes up straight away. You don't have to look at the flavor down on the glass. It's like if the aromas jump out of the glass, they come to your nose. It's very exuberant. It's quite intense. And it's so attractive this way. And after, in the mouth, you have this juicy character, this freshness that make it very attractive. So it's definitely a wine that you can catch and enjoy in early years. But I've been surprised quite several times, and recently, before the problem with the COVID, I was traveling in North America, and in Quebec, a consumer opened Moret Saint-Denis Village, 1985, in beginning of 2020.
Okay.
And the Moret was great. So
really?
it's definitely a wine that can age, but then you can enjoy early. I think what makes this wine a little bit special, part of his personality, it is according to the location of the two plots up the slope. It's a fresh microclimate. It's all the way up. After it's the forest. You don't have vineyards anymore. So it's quite in altitude, and it's fresh, especially at night. So as a consequence, there is always on our Moret Saint-Denis Village this lovely acidity, which is the signature of this wine.
Yeah.
And it gives it this tension in the wine, which is very typical of our Moret Saint-Denis Village. And I think on the top of it, in addition, since we are up the slope, there is almost no soil because all the fine soil has been carried down by the water. And what is left is a rock, it's a limestone. So these two plots are similar kind of soil, very rocky. And the calcaire makes this freshness even stronger. So the typicity of this wine with this lovely acidity comes from both the microclimate and the calcaire of the soil, the limestone, and then make it with a lot of tension into the wine.
Okay, good. All right, let's move. Let's move to the lovely Clos. Let's show this lovely picture that you. Oh, too bad I'm blocking part of the view, but anyway, let's move to the next one.
That's a nice picture. I love this picture because here you are located on the top of the Clos des Lambrays at 330 meters of altitude, and you can see all the Clos. And from this point, you understand a lot. You realize that the vineyard of Clos des Lambrays, it's all about diversity and complexity. The vineyard of Clos des Lambrays, it's in slope, and generally speaking, it's east-facing. But in details, the Clos make like undulations, like waves. So from one side to another of the undulation, you don't have the same exposure, and as a consequence, you do not have the same microclimate. As well, talking about the microclimate, in between the lowest point you see by the village down there, and compared to the upper point where by the gate, you have 60 meters of altitude of
60.
60, and it's a lot.
Yeah.
So just looking at this vineyard, you can understand that there are several microclimates inside the Clos des Lambrays. After, of course, you can see as well that the soil have some different colors. And these colors come from the mother rocks underneath. So we have 4 different layers of mother rock from bottom to top. And on the top of this mother rock, this bedrock, you have different soils. Some part of the Clos des Lambrays have very superficial soils, like, 20 centimeters, no more. Other parts, we have deeper soil, like 80 centimeters. On some places, we have sandy soil, or soils with gravels, or with little rocks. So, in fact, it's really like a mosaic. It's plenty of little plots inside the historical Clos des Lambrays of 8.66 hectares.
Well, since you're talking about the different plots, I should show the other map that you sent, which is this one. Can you see the whole thing or not really? I can't move it.
Well, I think we see almost everything. There is just the top which is missing. But yes, so this map shows the Clos des Lambrays vineyard another way. And it tells you then in the Clos des Lambrays, finally, if you want to make it simple, because all what I was talking about before, the microclimates, the different rocks, soils, it's very complex. But if you want to make it simple, inside the Clos des Lambrays, you have 3 main parts. You have the south part, which is along the Clos de Tar. It's les 50 ouvrés on the map. After, at the opposite, you have the side of the Clos des Lambrays along the Clos Saint-Denis, which is north, and it's La Plante. This is what has been replanted back in 1980. It's on the right of the picture. And in the middle part, in between Clos de Tar and Clos Saint-Denis, you have les 80 ouvrés. So these are the 3 main the three main orientation in the style of the terroir we have. And after, every part is divided in between many plots. And this map is a map of the different cuvées we fermented in 2019, sorry.
19.
Yes. Voilà, so one thing I didn't talk about as well about the Clos des Lambrays, to go back to the vineyard, it is finally the vines themselves are very, very old because 2.5 hectares has been replanted in 1980, but everything else is from the beginning of the 20th century. We have vines from 1914, 1915. We have vines from the 20s, from the 30s. And particularly, you see, on the part close to the Clos de Tarbes, les 50 ouvrés dessous, these are the oldest vines of the Clos des Lambrays, and they are from 1898.
Wow.
1898, so it's right after Phylloxera.
Phylloxera, yeah. Okay.
And
that's amazing.
So
and how's the health of the vines over there?
They start to be tired, but we take, of course, a great care of every single plant. From these vines, we start a program of massal selection as well, of course, because it's a great genetical heritage of Pinot Noir. It's fascinating to walk in the vineyard and to look after these very old vines because every vine is different from his neighbor. And this is what we call massal selection, you know. So we take a great care of them and we start to make a massal selection from it in order to, in the future, replant, because we will have to replant with the heritage of the genetical heritage of the clos. So this is the idea on the back of it. So those old vines are interesting for that, for the vines themselves, but they're interesting for the soils as well, because finally, since this time, the soil has never been,
resting.
Yes. Yeah. When you make a plantation, sometimes, especially in the middle of the 20th century, sometimes intervention were a little bit too strong and the soil was disturbed. But they are very close to original soils, and it's interesting for that as well.
Okay. There was a question regarding the winemaking. Do you ferment plot by plot? We've seen that your cellar before with different names and all that. So I think you do that, right?
Yes. You know what? I will answer this question, but I think before to explain finally how we do the thing, maybe I should explain why we do the thing. What I mean is, what is our goal? What is our purpose? What we are looking for the Clos des Lambrays? Alors, to explain that, I think I have to say that at the Domaine, we are lucky enough to have very, very old bottles of Clos des Lambrays. We have bottles from the 30s, 20s. The oldest bottle is 1918. And we have 1919 as well. So drinking these bottles, you learn a lot. First of all, it's a shock because the wines are damn good, you know. I've been lucky enough to taste, and it was in 2002, so way before to arrive here, I was lucky enough to taste Clos des Lambrays 1918, and the wine was spectacular. So, of course, you have the historical signification of 1918, just after First War #1.
Yeah.
But as well, the wine itself is impressive. It's a wine with a very pale color, like tea, but the flavors are so intense, and in the mouth, you don't have a lot of body, of course. You don't have a lot of structure, but the wine is so emotional. It's a wine more in the spirit than in the body, you see? So it's this kind of wine you remember all your life. And recently, I had the chance to taste Clos des Lambrays 1919, so 1 year after, and there the wine is totally different. The 1919 is almost young, you know, with a lot of body, yes, big color. You feel it's like a young guy. And 1919 have definitely a couple of other decades ahead to age. So when you taste those very old bottles of the Clos des Lambrays, and I can tell you about 1934 and so, it makes you, first of all, very humble, that's for sure. But after, you say, how? Back then, there were no chemicals. They were making the wines with whole bunches. And they were making the wine plot by plot because they didn't have the big tanks. It was wooden tanks of maximum 50 hectoliter. Yeah? So thinking about that and having those great emotions with those very old bottles, it makes you think, and finally the idea, the dream or the goal, I don't say we will succeed, but this is the idea, is to try to do bottle as good as back then. Finally, what I didn't talk about the historical part of the domain, it is that in the 20th century, in the middle of the 20th century, because the ownership was this way, the domain fall a little bit asleep. The owner was Madame Cosson, and she didn't took really care of the property and of the vineyards, and people were talking about the property, the Clos des Lambrays, as the sleeping beauty. So after came Thierry Bruin, which is the great man of the Clos des Lambrays. Thierry Bruin came in 1980, and he ran the property until 2018. So when Thierry Bruin came, the domain was almost a ruin, and Thierry Bruin restored, first of all, the vineyards, and after, the reputation of the domain during 38 years. And now the purpose, this is a why I was talking about before, why we are doing all what we are doing now, is to try to make wines at the level or as good as those great bottles that we have in the domain of the 30s, 20s, and even before. Voilà. So having all that in mind, that explain all the recent developments we are doing in the domain. And the winemaking plot by plot is only one little part of all the changes and developments we are doing. And once again, the changes we can do today, it's thanks to the work that Thierry Bruin had made. And I pay a tribute to Thierry for that. But thanks to all his improvements and all his work, now we can try to go to the next step. And the next step is, finally, it's obvious, it's simple, it starts in the vineyard. We turned organic last year. So 2019 is the first year organic for the Domaine des Lambrays. And
wow,
it's a great, yes, it's a great challenge for us because we have technical issues. You know, the vines are planted perpendicular to the slope. So technically it's not so simple, but we did it. And this year we turn biodynamic with certification. So voilà, we take it seriously. And I think it's an important evolution. It's not a revolution because the viticulture was at a very good level before, of course, but it's an important evolution in the vineyard to help us to improve. Voilà. And after in the winemaking, yes, this is true. Then we change a little bit the approach because before it used to be fermented in big tanks of 84 hectoliters. And from 2019, we take this approach in the winemaking plot by plot. And the idea is very simple. The idea is to say, we are so lucky. We are almost on a situation of monopoly in a Grand Cru, in Côte de Nuit, in one piece, 8.66 hectares. It's unique. So on the top of it, the vineyard is very complex, as we discussed about. Pinot Noir is very sensible to those differences of terroir. So let's take opportunity of it to ferment separately the different areas. Let's try to reveal the best we can of every little places, of every plots. So vinify separately, age separately, and blended before bottling. And I think with this approach, it should make interesting results because I know it from my previous experiences. When you have this approach and when you put the different cuvées all together, 1 + 1 can make 3. Because it's like if the quality of every cuvée is added one to another. It's like in a company, everybody have his own skills, and you need the skills of everybody to make great things. And us, this is a chance we have from the Clos des Lambrays. It is we can play with all the area almost of the Clos des Lambrays.
Okay, great. So let's move to this bottle.
Yes.
You must be thirsty. You know, you talk for 20 minutes about the Clos.
I'm sorry, I talk too much.
No. I'm sure you can throw in a whole day of fascinating information about the Clos. So this was I decided to open the bottle because later on I'm going to do a very interesting tasting. I've got a few friends coming.
Nice.
And because you touched on 2 wines in this vintage, so we're going to taste the other one as well.
Okay, interesting. Anyway, I'm glad to have this Clos des Lambrays 17 because this is typical of the Clos, you know. What?
At what stage did you arrive? It was already in barrel for 1 year, or?
Actually, I bottled this wine. It was in spring 2019.
19, right? Okay.
But I just made the bottling.
The bottling.
This is of course the last vintage of Thierry Bois, and I think it's a glorious Clos des Lambrays. It's a very nice Clos des Lambrays. It's typical of the wine of this vineyard because at the same time you have a wine in the nose, intense, complex, large. You have those beautiful floral character like old roses and mix with some spices character and tobacco. I have as well a little bit of fresh herbs. So you have all this complexity in the wine, which is coming straight from the vineyard, you know. So you have this large aromatic profile, and in the mouth, it's very elegant. It's very graceful. It's like if the wine touch your mouth very softly. It's like a caress. There is a lovely delicacy into this wine. And from almost the day one, you know, because it's part of the DNA of the Clos des Lambrays. It's to make, to produce this wine with those kind of silky tannins. Some people talk about feminine character. I don't know if it's fair or not to describe it this way, but there is definitely a lot of finesse on the DNA of the Claude Lambray. It's probably the more elegant or the more, close to Chambol of the Grand Cru of Moret Saint-Denis. And on some vintages, this elegance may make you think that the wine is fragile, but not at all. Definitely, the Claude Lambray, even if it's light and graceful and elegant during his first years, it can age very, very well. We have the proof of it with the nice library we have in the domain.
But it's got very good tension. You know, I feel like, you know, there's, even though it's quite velvety and you can feel like, you know, the fruit is already, you know, giving quite a bit of pleasure. But then you've got the tension and the length and the depth.
Absolutely.
It's a lovely, lovely Lambray.
When I taste this wine, Paolo, I have in my head this idea of dimension, horizontal and vertical. It's so complex that you have these two dimensions.
Yeah. Well, for those who are tasting with the two wines, I'm sure you see the difference of the bottles.
Yes.
We've got a bigger and fatter bottle of the 17 than the 14. So tell us a little bit about the 14 as well, please, Jacques.
Alors, in fact, finally, 14, it started a little bit like 17. They are like two brothers. Very early season, spring like summer. But after, the difference is then in 14, from end of July until end of August, the weather turned to be cloudy, fresh, with no sun and with rain sometimes. So with the 14, it's like if the growing season has been very, 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 very fast until end of July, and after it slowed down a lot. And it's not that bad, because end of July and August, it was the time for the veraison, you know, and the final maturity before harvest. So the maturity slowed down, and Pinot Noir like to have this slow maturity process. And I think it's finally the major difference in between those two vintages. And this is why you see on the 14, you still have this seductive character from the early vintages, but in the mouth, you feel more body, more material.
More weight, yeah.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And I see it like the result of this slow maturity process in the month of August. And after, in September, it turned to be very sunny again. So we had perfect conditions to achieve the maturity.
Great. And I wouldn't be shy to open this bottle. I mean, again, with a few hours of airing, it'll go well with the food.
I think this is a key point. It's the condition of opening. And if you are careful enough to open them 4 hours ago, just let it breathe. The wines open up very well. And I like personally this idea that to be good, a wine must be good always. To be good later, it must be good from the beginning. After, of course, from a young wine, you don't expect to have evolution of flavors. But to drink those great bottles on the fruit like that, it's not a crime. It's not a crime at all. What, of course, if we open them young, we are missing all the nice evolution notes. And it's a great privilege to taste Lambray of 20, 30, 40 years or even more. Because there you have such a high level of perfumes, of complexities and appears, and you don't have at the beginning. But to drink them just on the fruit like that, why not? I can understand. Wine is made for sharing, for pleasure. This is what it's all about, and the circumstances are important. And if there is a good circumstances, no problem to go for it, open the bottle, and enjoy the wine, even if it's young.
Great. There was a question earlier about a red wine maker making, or mainly red wine maker making white wine. I guess some of the viewers may not know your history of your time at Domaine de l'Arlot.
Yeah,
You
but
made white wine there, but what about making white wine
yes,
again now? How do you feel?
I think this question make a lot of sense, and I feel the winemaking of the white and of the reds quite different. When you make white, you are almost like a spectator, but when you make a red, you are like an actor. You act because when you make a red, you put the grape into the tank, you distem or not, but after you make pigeage, remontage, and it's open top fermenter, so you see the grapes, and the maceration lasts for 3 weeks. So you are really an actor. Instead than the whites, you press the juice at the beginning, you decant, you put it into the barrel, and the fermentation happens in barrel. And it's quite mysterious because you don't see the juice fermenting. It's inside the barrel. So it's a different approach. Myself, I like so much making both. There is a lot to learn anyway on both colors. And I think in our job, we don't do wine very often. At Domaine des Lambrays, I will maybe make the next 20 vintage, no more. So every vintage, it's occasion to try new things, to try to improve. And it's true on both color. And this is what is fascinating.
Now, we only have a few minutes left, but this question will, lead to a few days of discussion. How would you compare the characteristic from Clos de Tard and Lambrays? I don't know. You have 5 minutes only because Instagram live switched us off.
Okay. Okay. So the answer is very clear. I don't know. I don't know because, of course, I've been lucky enough to know Clos de Tard intimately during 4 years. And it's a great privilege, and I keep it for me, and I will remember it all my life. But Clos des Lambrays, I'm just starting. So I give you appointment in another 5, 6, 7 years, and I will answer you better.
Okay.
But Paolo, if I have time, part of the answer is on the landscape. Just look at these two vineyards. Clos de Tard is a perfect rectangular.
Yeah.
In the middle of the slope, very regular. Clos des Lambrays have this strange form. It's not regular. You have different exposure, much more definitely complexity on just looking at the two plots.
Yeah.
Just looking at the two vineyards. I think a good part of the answer is on the vineyard, just looking at the these two historical Grand Crus of Moret Saint-Denis.
And the planting have always been like that. One being,
yes.
perpendicular, one being along the slope.
Yes, the planting has been very well made. It's perpendicular to the slope, so it's great like that. This avoid water erosion. It maintains the soil in place, and it's so important. And after, it have influences on the maturity process, and especially nowadays with the global warming and the very hot season we have to face now, to be planted like us south-north, perpendicular to the slope. So this is the same in Clos des Lambrays and Clos de Tard. It really helps us to protect our grapes against sunburn, which is échaudage, as we say en français. So this is a great way of plantation for the soils, for the maturity process, for the disease as well, because the north wind can dry everything very efficiently. So yes, it's a great way of plantation. After, if it's rare, it's because it's very difficult to work, especially with a tractor. So a lot of work is done by hand.
Okay, great. Okay, guys, any other questions that you want to ask Jacques? I saw one earlier. How long should the 14 be uncorked? I think we answered that question before. I think 3 to 4 hours will be good.
Yes, absolutely.
No? Okay. Well, I'm showing a picture of this lovely cellar. You're doing something to at the domain, right? What's the program now?
Alors, once again, it's according to the goal we have to try to make these wines as good as they used to be before. With this plot by plot approach in the winemaking, we will rebuild a new winery to have smaller tanks, wooden tanks, according to the size of every plot inside the Clos des Lambrays. And this is a new development that we are working on right now. We are building a new winery inside the old limits of the historical building of the domain. So it's very exciting, and on the future, hopefully for 2021, we will have a very good, a great tool to vinify at its optimum the grapes of the Clos des Lambrays and in general of the domain.
So it should be ready in time for the 21 harvest.
I cross my fingers. The schedule was very tight, and with the sanitary crisis, with the COVID, we took 4 weeks of delay, which is not great, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe yes, maybe no. We'll see.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everyone for joining, and I'd like to thank Jacques for giving us so much information and sharing some lovely insight on the domain and the Clos with us. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Jacques, and I hope to visit soon, but we need this COVID to go away before I can visit my favorite region of Burgundy. So in the meantime, enjoy your lunch. I'm gonna go and open my other bottles. I have those two 14 and 17 ready. So we'll speak soon.
Okay, Paulo, I look forward for your report.
All right.
And thank you for this talk. Thank you, everybody. And yes, I look forward to see you soon as possible in Moret to taste the different cuvées.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Jacques.
See you, Paulo. See you,
See you.
everybody. Bye.
Bye.